When you're growing up as a kid and you find that you are genuinely gifted at so many things, it's a blessing, it's like you're God's favorite. But when it gets to the point where you now have to focus on one out of all of this, particularly for commercial or economic viability, then you realize that what was once seen as a blessing is almost a curse because you don't know what to settle for. Yeah.
Welcome to the Scaling My Startup podcast by NarrativeLabs. I'm your host, Talula Doherty Additional, and today I'm joined by Frank Ikemefune. I hope I did not butcher your surname.
No, you didn't.
I didn't. Okay, thank God. Who is a content creator, an all-round creative, and also I also think of him as a visionary. So I'm very excited to dive into this conversation because I know that there's so much that's going to be unlocked, and I know that a lot of people are going to get a lot of I want to say healing and also drive to go after their goals and their purpose. So let's start. Frank, nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So we met not a long time ago. We met a couple of years ago when we both moderated an event together.
Yes.
And you became like a little brother to me. I don't know, it was so weird. We just kind of instantly connected and got along really, really well. So
Yeah.
it's just really wonderful to have you here today. So let's dive straight into it and talk a bit about your journey into the great creative industry. How did you sort of find yourself in the creative industry? Was it a deliberate like a path that you charted for yourself, or was it something that just sort of happened?
Okay, so I'd always had artistic inclinations, right from childhood. I always found myself in front of the audience doing something, be it drama, be it debates, be it quiz or presentation, reading a newsletter, or dancing even, because I used to be a phenomenal dancer as a kid. I was also very good at football, so like the attention, I'd gotten used to being somewhat of a cynosure of all eyes right from when I was year high. So I'd say that's one thing that has been a constant for me, excelling in the performing arts. So when you're growing up as a kid and you find that you are genuinely gifted at so many things, it's a blessing, it's like you're God's favorite.
True.
But
Yes.
but when it gets to the point where you now have to focus on one out of all of this, right? Particularly for commercial or economic viability, then you realize that what was once seen as a blessing is almost a curse because you don't know what to settle for. So after, when I was done from the University of Ibadan and I finished my service, my father wanted me to immediately go in for a master's degree. I knew I didn't want to do that at that point in time, so we had a major disagreement. I said I didn't want to do that, because his prerogative for me was going for your master's. As soon as you're done, going for your PhD. That was all he was saying, because I was a straight A student, so he just assumed like just go straight into the academics and all of that. I didn't want
I think most African parents would have the same thought process as your dad had.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
this
absolutely.
is a genius, so why not keep
Yeah,
going with the academics?
yeah. But I didn't want to do that, because I knew that in as much as I craved knowledge, I did not crave knowledge in a structured / regimented format. And I knew that pursuing a career in the academics would mean that there is definition and regimen to it, and I did not want that.
Okay.
So I was
Sorry, I just want to ask you, how were you able to stand up to your dad? Because I know with a lot of people in that situation, what usually ends up happening is they just, okay, let me just do this to make this man happy. Then when I'm done, I'll do whatever I want. So how did you sort of find the strength in that moment back then to sort of stand up for really what you wanted?
Okay. So I would say there was already a track record of me making smart decisions, So uh I was pretty much a good kid, if I do say so myself.
Okay,
Right. I was
okay,
I
so that
was
helps.
yeah, I was pretty much a good kid, you know. The only rancor I would say existed occasionally would be my love for football. And my dad didn't want that at the detriment of my academics. You know, but in spite of that, I was always excelling academically. So
Okay,
um
okay. Oh,
so when I was done with school and I was like, I don't want to delve in, I don't feel like I should do that, you know. We had that
hmm
disagreement for a while, but when he saw that I was hell bent, I was like, okay, so what do you want to do? I said, I'll look for a job, you know. So I went to the radio stations in Ibadan. I grew up in Ibadan. I went to radio stations in Ibadan trying to get a, um, you know, trying to work at a radio station. And I remember I went to one of the biggest radio, I think it was the biggest at that point in time in Ibadan. And I went there, submitted a demo, had an interview and all of that. And I was told that I was not good enough. In fact, I was told that I was not good enough to be an intern,
wow.
which was very shocking for me because I knew that I was better than even the person interviewing me. Genuinely, I
Energy, I
knew that I
love
was
it.
better.
Yes.
So it was a very humbling experience for me. I went to another radio station. Those ones didn't even get back to me. So
Wow.
I didn't understand all of that at that point in time. So ultimately, I got a job at an engineering firm that had sentiments in the mining industry. Bear in mind
Wow.
that I
Okay.
studied political science, you know, so I had no idea what I was delving into, but I enjoy a challenge, you know, so because it
Mm-hmm.
means that now I have to accelerate my learning process, and I thoroughly enjoy that. So I did that, and I quickly climbed the ranks, you know, and I did that for about 20 months,
Okay.
almost two years. One day I just woke up and I'm like, nah, I'm not gonna do 2 years here. I'm going to
Okay. So
quit.
I have a question. So, how was the pay there? Were you happy with the pay, or
No, it was abominable,
but okay, it
you
wasn't
know,
great.
but it was better than nothing.
Better than nothing. Yeah, at least it was getting you like you were gaining momentum in some
Yeah,
sort of way.
yeah.
I get it.
So
I
at
get it.
least you wake up in the morning and you know you're going somewhere.
You're going somewhere.
You know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So
you're
why was that 2 year mark significant to you? Why did you think, okay, it's getting to 2 years. I'm not going to be here for 2 years. What was it about that 2 years that you thought, no?
one morning I got to work and looked at everybody around me, and I just thought to myself that if I stay here for 2 years, my life will be a reflection of everything that I'm seeing around. All of these people, I would, no matter how distinct or no matter how unique I think my path is, eventually it'll blend into uniformity and my life will just
Yeah.
be an echo of what exists around here. And I did not want that.
Mm.
In spite of the fact that I was quite young, I knew that I wanted different from my life. I'd had the vision from when I was young that I am meant to be global, and I knew that I was not on my path at that point in time. So I'm like,
Hmm.
nah, I won't spend 2 years here.
I think that
So
is so inspirational. Like the ability to know who you are and also listen to that still small voice, because a lot of us
yeah,
have that we all have that still small voice. I call it the Holy
absolutely,
Spirit, but if
yeah,
someone is not Christian, you just call it the still small voice, the universe, whatever it is telling you this is for you or this is not for you. But it takes a
mhm,
lot of courage to listen to it, because oftentimes people on the outside, the external people, may see you on a path and say, oh, you're doing well, why
yeah.
do you want to leave this is working for you.
Mm.
So yeah, no, I really admire that about you. Okay, so I'm tuned in. So you got to 2 years, you decided to leave. What
So
next?
I
What happened
so I,
next?
I I quit. I didn't have a plan B, nothing. I just quit. I told my father. I said I was done. I was gonna quit. And I remember we're on a drive. And I remember he said he knew that this day would come, and
Mm,
that what do I have lined up? I said, I don't have anything lined up, but I'll figure it out. And he was like, okay, which was shocking for me because I expected him to resist or to, quiz me. But, they'd always known that I had artistic inclinations, very profound. So, again, when I was in the university, I was the best rapper in my university.
Oh, I didn't
So,
know that. Oh, can you give us some rap now?
I'll give you at the end of the show.
Okay,
So,
okay, okay. You know I had to
uh,
ask.
so, um, so I quit in June. Then July, I saw an ad for a rap competition. It was the biggest rap competition in Nigeria. I called it the Hennessy VS class, right? So
Oh,
I
yeah, I know of that one.
yeah,
It is
so
big. I think MI was the face of it or something at one point.
yeah, MI Vector. So I put in for it and I won. Right?
Wow.
So I won. That was in
Amazing.
August 2017. I won, and then all of a sudden, my name was on all the media outlets and all of that. Hey, the new rap, whatever. Hey,
Sensation
all of
person.
this, blah blah blah. So that's so my dad seeing me win a rap competition, pretty much just like a national rap competition, thousands put in for it, right? And I won. Now the circumstances that even surrounded me winning made it more insane because the people I competed with in the finals had already known that they had qualified for the finals more than a month prior. I
Mm.
only found out that I had qualified for the finals a day before. I'm
What?
telling you.
How come?
So I
Why was
have
there that
24.
disparity in you finding out?
Yeah, so they did this polls thing. So I came third in the polls. So I thought they were only going to pick the first guy. So
Okay, okay, okay.
I didn't know until the day before the finals. I then saw they released the poster and I saw my name on there. I was shocked because I remember vividly where I was. I was at the mall in Ibadan. I was going to see a movie, and then I saw I was tagged. Then I checked it out. I'm like, yo, I've not prepared for this. So
Mm.
I remember I went to the house of one of the guys who had qualified long ago. I went to his studio to meet him. I'm like, what do I do, man? Like, and he was like, damn, he had been preparing for more than a month, so he was ready. So I
Mm.
went home, and then I pulled an all-nighter till like 4 a.m. My father came out. He came to the dining and then saw me. I was like, why are you not asleep? I said, I'm preparing for it. He said, go and sleep, man. Go and sleep. Whatever happens, happens. Go and sleep.
Mm.
So I went to sleep. I slept for like an hour, 2 hours, thereabout. I woke up again because I had to come to Lagos. The final was in Lagos.
Mm.
So
Mhm,
I
mhm.
left for Lagos, went to the hotel at Ikoyi, went into the hotel, locked because the final was supposed to happen at night at Beat FM. So I got into the
Okay.
hotel and continued preparing. And then I went to the finals and then I won. So the
Wow.
circumstances surrounding how I won further accentuated the fact that, man, this guy is tenacious. That registered in my
Mm.
father's mind. Like, he doesn't just like excel like academically. This guy, he has this tenacity, man. So
Mhm.
that's just whatever it was that they felt concerning maybe my life choices or what. They were just like, I think this guy will be all right eventually.
Yeah.
So that was
Because
the
your actions had proven that you were always
yeah,
able to
e-
somehow land on your feet.
exactly. So that was the last time they ever like, okay, what are you gonna do? How are you? What do you?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
stopped questioning me from that moment onwards. So I went
Okay.
into rap, and that's how my music career started. But it didn't pan out how I expected it to pan out. I didn't
Mm.
blow up, although I knew a lot of people in the industry. I had like relationship with a whole lot of them. They knew who I was. But the music in itself didn't just pan out. And then again, you need capital, you need funds for all of
Yeah.
that. I didn't have that anywhere and stuff. So again, I was rapping, and rap is not like, the Afro beats that you have the higher
Hmm.
propensity of like blowing up. And so I did that from like 2018 till 2021.
Okay.
Um, 2021. Then 2022, January 12th, I just, because I'd always been the funny guy, right? So I just decided to put out a funny content on TikTok. I called it "If an Agbero Had a Diary," right? And I put that out there,
Yeah.
and that went viral immediately.
So it
And
would.
that
What you mean from the first video? It
the
went
very
viral.
first video, the very first video went viral. The very first went
That
viral,
is that is so
and I'm
crazy
like,
to me. That is so crazy
legit.
because
And I'm like, you people like this? Okay. And then
I
I
can
just
do
continued.
more.
I just continued. And that was it. I would get calls from the craziest places. Top government functionaries calling me, telling me they love the video. They love the video content. Brands will reach out to me, high flyers. All of they'll reach out and be like, yo, what's going on in your mind, man? I'm like, what? So
Oh
I was
my God.
collaborating with a whole lot of brands, getting paid. I'm like, what? Really?
Was so okay? So when the brand started to reach, I have two questions about this. Number one is, where did you get the like, how did you get the inspiration for the content? Because the first time I knew about your Diary of an Agbero before I met you, before we
Yeah,
hosted this event together, because my husband was a big fan, like
yeah,
big, right? So
yeah,
every time I just see him like chuckling. You know how you meant to
yeah,
just be laughing about something. I'm like, what's this man laughing about? Like, what are you
yeah,
laughing at? Oh, this guy, this guy. Oh, you've got to watch this. So that's how I first got introduced to your comedy
yeah,
content, right? And then
yeah,
how is this guy coming up with this? Like, has he ever worked in like a garage, like you would call it, right? Has he ever worked
yeah.
in a garage, or where are you getting it from? So that's my first question. And well, regarding this, and the second is that when the brand started reaching out to you, how did you sort of know how to price? Like, did you start with like top level pricing immediately, or were you that content creator who was like, oh, let me just give them something manageable just so I can get a leg in? Because I know a lot of creators struggle
Yeah,
with how to price when brands approach them.
yeah. So, for the first one, how that content came about. So, uh, my parents raised me as an ajebota. Even though like it was not like there were commensurate funds. I didn't come from a wealthy home, but my parents were enlightened. My father was a teacher. My mom was a teacher. Growing up, my toys were books. At age 6, I was already reading James Hadley Chase, Sidney Sheldon. You
Yeah.
know, I started reading pretty early in life. So, but like I mentioned earlier, I was very good at football. Like when I'm saying very good, like generational talent at football, to the point
Okay.
where people will come to the gate of our house and be appealing to my father to allow me come play football and like represent our district, our area, because of
Oh
how
wow.
good I was, you
Mm-hmm,
know.
mm-hmm,
So I was really good. Now, I grew up in an area close to somewhere they call Molete in Ibadan. Now, anybody who knows Molete in Ibadan would know that that was the headquarters for thuggery and hooliganism in Southwest, right? There was
mm-hmm,
there was a political stalwart at that point in time called Alhaji Adedibu. He was like he had a garrison of thugs at his command, that they would use for political thugs and whatnot, political
mm-hmm,
whatever. So now, because of how good I was at football, a lot of these thugs, I used to play football with them, they loved me because I was so good. They loved me.
mm-hmm,
So they would protect me. They would, whenever I played football, they would give me money. They were so impressed by my talents, right? So, but as a kid, I'd always been a sponge. I could soak up experiences without necessarily making it mine. I would just internalize and compartmentalize. So their mannerisms, the way they spoke, their approach to life, the way they approached love, the way they approached um, you know, mental health, the way they approached their goals in life, I internalized all of that. So um this content that I started putting out was just me reaching deep into that experience that I had, stowed away I was
Mm-hmm.
able to withdraw from that deposit and just externalize it. It's
Okay.
a sharp contrast to my growing up, because I was an intellectual kid, always blowing big grammar, you know. But that was somewhere in there. So the content just gave me an opportunity to express that. Even the names that I was using in that content are real names, real people,
Mm-hmm.
When the content went viral, some of them reached out and were like, "We are seeing you, well done, this and that." You know, it was very authentic, because these these were shared experiences, that I had
Mm-hmm.
with these guys, and I love that about myself, because I've always been the kind of person who would find it worryingly easy to blend into any environment. Put me in the midst of the 1 percentile in the world, I would easily blend in. Put me in the lowest of lows, I would effortlessly blend in. So I'd always been that kind of person. So that was how that content came about.
Okay.
But then again, there was a twist to it. All I used to have this quotable quotes that I would tweak. That it was just a function of how vast I am. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
putting an intellectual spin to it. So the blend of both worlds was what made it very unique and very difficult to replicate. You
Yeah,
know.
yeah. It was very unique, and you were so consistent with it. I remember you would come out with
Yeah.
episodes, quite regularly. So how were you able to achieve that consistency? Did you sort of set a target for yourself, like I'm going to bang out maybe, I don't know how many videos it was, 4 videos a week, or
Mm.
did you sort of just do it as it, like, come up with the episodes as and when they came to you?
Sincerely, there was no rhyme or reason to it. It just I just found that it worked. People loved it and they wanted more. And I'm like, okay, cool. Then brands started reaching out and they were like, oh, we'll pay you to just turn on your ring light and speak. I'm like, what? I'll do this all day, man. So I started doing that. I was doing that consistently. Now, as for the pricing, I was living with one of my closest friends. So we were living together at that point in time. So, and he was a he was a it was a it was an associate product marketing manager at Google. So
Okay.
he already kind of had an idea as to how these things worked. So I remember he was in a meeting. He was in a Zoom meeting on the day that a brand first reached out to me, right? So I was having a conversation with them. He was hearing everything. So those ones were asking me, okay, so what would you charge? I, I didn't know what to charge. I was at a loss for what to say. He just typed the number on the phone and showed me and said I should mention it. In my head, I'm like, isn't this too much? I'm like, isn't this too much?
Mm,
Yo,
mm.
he was like, no. I'm like, okay. And then I called the figure and they were like, you know what? Why don't we just take 50,000 off this? I'm like, what? I'm like, okay, you have a deal. They're like, okay. Uh, so how would you want us to pay you 70% upfront or that? I'm like, send everything now.
Mm,
I wasn't
mm,
even certain of what I just send everything. And they were like, okay.
mm.
And then by afternoon I got the alert. I'm like, is it what?
Is this real money
For
or,
real? I'm like,
yeah.
what's going on? And that was just it. So I then started to equip myself with commensurate knowledge on how to deal with these things, how to structure these dealings. Like that when I became like brand ambassador for brands, and all of
So you were
that.
brand ambassador for, was it Glow?
No, Nine Mobile.
Nine Mobile. Okay, yes, yes, yes. So that was a pretty big deal because you were in all of the advertising. I saw you
Yeah.
in like static print ads, and you also were in video content for them.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a huge deal. Did you broker that yourself, or did you have like a manager that sort of helped you with
No,
the
there was
negotiations?
an agency brokered that
An
for
agency. Okay, perfect. Okay, interesting. So there you were. You were big. You had made it. You were big in the in the online space.
Yeah,
Brands, Nine Mobile is a major telco, and
yeah,
most content creators know that it's mainly telcos and banks that pay
yeah.
the best. When it
The
comes
big
to,
box. Yes,
yeah, the big bucks, exactly. So you had really arrived, if I can put it that way,
yes.
and everything was going great to people looking from the outside looking in. So at this point, I want to just get into your mind a little bit and find out what made you, because I'm even like talking about it, my own heart is beating because I'm like, you're in this place, you're doing so well, you're making all this money. That's like the mountaintop. But you decided that, you know what? You want to pivot to another kind of content, which is sort of more motivational, inspirational content, which is the content you do now. And thinking about it from a sort of viewer point of view, I'm not sure if it's the same audience. Like, how did you make that transition, and how are you confident that the audience you had with your comedic content, which you said was really varied from like people in
Mm,
the government to the everyday
yeah,
person to
yeah,
like my husband scrolling on the phone,
yeah.
to a more sort of intellectual
Mm,
audience who are craving
mm,
more, because your content is very thought provoking. It's very deep,
mm,
and it's not like you don't really use hooks. So it's more
mm,
like if you're interested, you sit and listen to the whole thing, and if you're not,
yeah,
you may not. You
yeah,
don't use like tips, tricks to make people want to watch, or visual tricks,
yeah,
but it's amazing. It's great content. So
yeah.
making that switch, was there any fear? Was there any trepidation? And what was really the impetus to make the switch?
Make that pivot. All right. Uh, Honestly, you see, there's a knowing, right? There's a knowing that every human being has. Nobody can deny it. There's a there's a knowing when you are in alignment with the original blueprint of your destiny, and when you have gone off on a tangent, right? Um, I remember I was always telling my friends when I was putting out the comedy content, I would say this content for me is just a means to an end. What the end is, I do not know yet, but this is just a means to an end. It's why I did not like being called a skit maker. I really hated it, you know. And and also I did not collaborate with other, funny content creators
I
because
noticed that, yeah.
yeah, I didn't do that. I had a lot of offers to like collaborate, but I didn't do that because it was a slippery slope. I felt that I would enjoy that life too much and become a prisoner to it, and it'll be very difficult for me to reinvent myself. Now, what I wanted to reinvent myself into, I did not know, but I just knew that I did not want to be I did not want to be known as a. Some people were already calling me a comedian, even. You know, I did not want to be known as purely that because I had so much or so many creative proclivities. So I'll give the credit to God. It was God's orchestration because 5 months into the whole thing, into like the whole comedy content, I started having this burden to stop. You know, as the days went by, the burden became heavier to stop it. And one day I just agreed. I'm like, you know what? Cool. And then I stopped. And it did not make sense to anybody. It did not make sense to my friends, my family. It did not make sense. You were like, you're leaving money on the table. What the hell is wrong with you? Do you know for how long you were hungry when you were pursuing your rap career? Now you have pivoted into something that is economically viable. And now 5 months in, you say you're done. Are you all right? Okay, you're done. What do you want to do next? I do not know. But I stopped, and I'll be honest with you. It That whole period it unraveled so much. The depth that I speak from now, I found it then. At that point in time, I became, closer to God. I started to understand patterns in my life more, and what I really needed to do became clearer at that point, in that stillness, in that silence, because believe me, it became silent. Oh, it became really, really silent. You're not putting out content, so nobody's calling you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it became really silent.
Was
Money
there any
wasn't
fear?
coming in. Oh
Sorry,
yeah,
sorry.
no, absolutely. There was initially, but after a while, I started getting used to the silence. It was like the fear initially was the world is moving on without me, right? So how do I play catch up? Like even when I come back, what is it? What do I do? But after a while, I I I became, you know, I became one with the process in itself. And I didn't bother for visibility anymore. I didn't bother for all of these vanity metrics. I didn't bother for any of that. And this thing went on for about 18 months.
Wow, I didn't know it was that long.
I disappeared completely, stopped putting out content completely. Nobody knew what it was that I was up to, but I was being prepared. It was like I was in the laboratory. I was being prepared. God was just cooking and putting all of these pieces together.
So what
And
were you doing
eventually,
in that season to get prepared? Were you
just
was
learning,
anything okay, learning?
just
Like
learning,
reading?
reading, reading, um, trying to gain perspectives, um, learning how to learn.
That's
Very
deep.
important.
Mm,
Learning how to learn, because you realize that we live in a very fast-paced world. You
yeah.
realize that for most people, they can only learn when they tune out the noise. They need to get away from the noise in order to learn, right? But I needed a competitive advantage, right?
Mm.
How do I learn even in the midst of the noise? So I wouldn't need to take time off. Even in spite of the noise, I am learning. So how do I learn how to learn? Was one of the things that I really focused on at that point in time. Started to learn how to draw analogies, how to draw insights from the simplest things, and which is what has characterized my content now. Like it's like I draw lessons from everyday phenomena, things that people just walk past, and then I draw insight from, and people are like, what? How are you able to extract?
Yeah, how did you sort of put the
Yeah,
two together and make it make sense, Yeah.
exactly. So
Yeah.
these were the things that you know God was helping me work through at that point in time. And ultimately, when he breathed wisdom upon all the knowledge accrued, it was time for me to set out. So, and I came out, and the very first video I put out went viral. That video is on 1 point something million views right now. The very first
Really? No,
went viral.
I just, oh, you're going viral. I'm like, my mind is blown because I speak to a lot of creators, and people always say, "Oh, it's my 20." You do maybe 100, then after you do 100, maybe two will go viral. Then you'll realize, okay, people like this style. Then you'll start pivoting more. But the first time you started the comedic content, first video went viral. You now pivoted to the. You're just a blessed child of God. That's what I can say. Number one.
Yeah, I am. I'm not even gonna. I'm not even gonna refute that. I
Yeah,
am.
you are. Definitely. And also because you didn't really tell your audience, oh, I'm coming back. Did you do like an explainer video or
Nope.
something? Or you just put out the content?
Nope. I just came out and then put that out and it went viral. No explanations, nothing. I
Wow. Do you
always
remember
say
what
something.
that video was about?
Yeah, it was about personal branding. You know,
Personal branding. Okay.
and it was a cutout from a conference I went to speak at. And I was invited to speak at it was a church conference, but it was primarily for position people for the marketplace. So I was talking about personal branding, and I just cut out about a minute plus from my talk there and posted it, and it went viral, and here we are. And that was on the 10th of June 2024. Then I had about 19,600 followers on Instagram. Now, as I speak to you, I have about 258,000.
Wow.
and that's in a year, right?
I didn't realize it had blown up that much. Yeah.
And I've
Amazing.
spoken at different conferences. I've given 2 TED talks, about to give the third, right? So ultimately, uh, one of the most important lessons I've learned through all of this is, one, you cannot evolve in the spotlight. You cannot reinvent under public glare. When you go to watch a stage play, right? When a scene is done, the actor has to let go of the spotlight and the adulation of the audience to retreat to the background where there are no prying eyes to change his costume for the next scene. The challenge that people who are in the spotlight have is that they are afraid of go- letting go of that spotlight because they do not know if they can get it back, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Everybody's afraid of reinventions because, you see, you know why we hold on to things? Because empty hands are scary. Empty hands are scary for 2 reasons. One, you can't really explain why your hands are scary because you ought to be holding something at every point in time. Then two, you do not know for how long your hands will be empty. So the indefinite nature of that process scares people. They're like, nah, I'd better just walk within the confinements of that which I can control. But I
Control, right?
always say this, in the grand scheme of things, what you can really control is very minuscule. Very, very minuscule. When you think about it, you can't control much. When people ask me questions and they're like, oh, like, how do you, what's your plan? And all of that, I'm like, I don't have any plan. I'm at the mercy of the road. And
Literally,
now this is
control
not
is
the
an
kind of
illusion.
advice that you give to everybody. Do you
Mm.
understand? It took
Control is
me,
an illusion. I
yeah,
agree.
it took me a while to get to this point where I'm like, yeah, you know what? Yeah, the best plan is to have no plan. Have a big vision, a grand, defined, definite vision that when they wake you up in the morning or wake you up from sleep, you wake up, you can say word for word, this is what I want to be, this is what I want to do, right? But as to how to get there, don't be a stickler for a definite pattern. Again, this is a personal perspective. You know why? Because the time that people spend working on a plan, I spend that time refining my spontaneity and creativity, knowing that whatever the road throws at me becomes a part of the journey. I don't have to go back to the drawing board to go and restructure or fine tune my plan. I won't even feel bad that, oh, this thing has derailed me from my plan. And then I'll now have to go restructure. Nah, I came onto this trip without even having a plan in the first place. So whatever you throw
Yeah.
at me becomes a part of it. It becomes ammunition for me, you know.
Mm,
So
mm,
that's my
mm.
perspective, and that's how I have been moving for the past, 1 year. Knowing that again, this path is one that has been orchestrated primarily by God. So this is His vision. So however which way He decides we get there, we get there. But I know I'm getting there.
I love
So
this. I just want to pick up on some things that you've said because I'm
yes,
finding it very enlightening. So
yeah,
I first want to talk about or pick up on, I feel like you are somebody who is like, you're not driven by the ego. I think a lot of
yeah,
people are driven by the ego, which is
yeah,
it's sort of natural. It's not a bad thing, but it's just the ego of, like you said, being in the spotlight, people knowing you for a certain thing, and there's a sense of personal pride in that. And because you won the rap competition, even as you were talking about the rap competition, what was in my mind was that, oh wow, some people would have just ridden that rap thing until maybe they're like 60, like, because it's a very prestigious competition,
yes,
so,
yes,
oh, I'm the winner of this, da, 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 this thing has to work, this thing has to work. But you were like, well, it's not really going the way I want it to be going. No problem, let's toss something out there. The first thing you tossed out there, the comedy video, it blew up, and that got a lot of accolades, a lot of attention, from a lot of different and prestigious sectors. But
yes,
again, you said, you know what, God is telling me something, I don't really know what it is. And it's that trust in God as well I want to
absolutely.
highlight, the trust in like the God in you, the voice within, the stillness, that still small voice to say, there's something else for me, and I'm going to trust myself. I'm going to trust that my journey is going to unfold, like you said, the way it should. And
Yeah.
then you started the motivational content, which is what you're continuing to do now. So, how have you been able to, for the creators out there, and just entrepreneurs, anybody who's a creative spirit and who often knows what they feel within, but they battle with
Yeah.
the external world and what people are saying they should be or they should do versus what they feel compelled to do. Have you been
Mm.
able to have a singular focus and a singular vision and execute? Also, how do you know when you're hearing a voice? How do you know there's God's voice? Because sometimes you're like, is this a distraction? Is it
Yeah.
God? Is it me overthinking? What is this voice? Sometimes you're confused. So how have you been able to identify that this is God's voice, and this is God's will for me, and I'm going to obey, because I feel that there's been also a lot of obedience
Yeah.
in your story, and sometimes it's
Yeah.
hard to obey. It's like you have this
Oh, oh,
huge
it is.
shiny thing over here, and then God is saying,
Yeah.
go over here. Your
Oh,
inner,
yeah.
your instinct
Yeah.
is saying go over here. So I'm
Yeah.
really intrigued as to how you have been able to do that.
Yeah. For me, a lot of people ask me, Frank, how are you so wise? Like, what is this wisdom? How are you so wise? And when they ask me this question, a lot of people, that I just want to be wise like you. I want to, in all honesty, right? There is a requisite amount of foolishness required to attain wisdom. Um, People want wisdom in title, but not in operation. You know, um, you need to be foolish a lot to extract wisdom. What people move past as irrelevant, you should be willing to pore through it and really sit with it and examine. And for the most part, you look foolish doing it. I think the key primarily to attaining wisdom, at least from a conventional standpoint, is you being able to mentor your foolishness.
Okay, I've not heard that
So
before.
every morning when you wake up, you have a pocket full of foolishness. And then you look at, for every scenario that you face in the day, depending on what it demands of you, you are able to supply foolishness. Depends on the context. You'll be able to supply commensurate amount of foolishness in order to glean insight from it. This is a whole TED talk that,
Okay.
so it's really deep. But I'm
Yeah.
just saying, like, ego is the enemy.
Yeah.
Ego is the enemy. A lot of people think that, oh, when you let go of ego, it means you no longer believe in yourself, and that's not true. I don't know anybody who has as much belief in themselves as I do. To be honest, I have a very, very definite and unshakable, irrefutable, immutable, indubitable confidence in myself, right? But ego is not really present because I know that if my ego is loud, it stands in the way of me learning. It stands in the way of me admitting that, oh, I was wrong with this, like I was way off,
Mm,
you know.
mm. Hmm.
So ego had been dealt with, but fortunately for me, I didn't deal with ego by myself. God helped me deal with it. Remember, I told you about applying to radio stations where I knew that I was
Yes.
overqualified for, and they told me
Yes.
I was not
Yes.
even good enough to be an intern.
Yes.
That entire period, right? Then getting a job that, in all fairness, I wasn't really treated well. I had to do a whole lot of manual stuff. I'd say graduate, brilliant
Mm.
graduate. I did a whole lot of manual jobs. At some point, I was kind of like a glorified errand boy and all of that. So all of these things really shrunk my ego. It really did. It really did.
Mm.
So
Mm.
I felt like that was God's way of conditioning me to not rely on my brilliance or my academic prowess or, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So when I say stuff now that I can do something now, it's not as a function of It's because I have outsourced and this is not something that I have outsourced the agency to God. And I always say something that the more you rely on God, the more belief you have in yourself. It's really paradoxical in that nature. And you see, the belief you have in yourself is not a consequence of what you can do. It's a consequence of who you have been with.